Good evening, everybody. Welcome back for another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, and back with me again, still licking his wounds from his NBA Finals predictions, my co-host, Julio Vela. What's up, man? I almost called you Julio.
Well, some people from time to time do call me Julio.
Yeah, not when you're making NBA Finals predictions, though.
If I distinctly remember saying Golden State in 4. I think I said that. I think we got tape. Do we have the tape?
We do, actually. But we don't have it ready and loaded. But you can go to YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, and see Julio's poor prediction skills, which is why he's sitting at this table and not working as a bookie in Vegas. But we got a great show for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have got with us this evening from the Harris County Pretrial Services Department, the head of the department, Mr. Kelvin Banks. Kelvin, thanks for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
We appreciate you coming on. This is a big step for us. You know, we got a lot of changes going on here, and we appreciate you coming on the program. I know there's not a lot that you can necessarily give in terms of opinions, so we're not going to ask you to steer too much in that direction. But we are gonna get Kelvin's take on the changes that are going on and get him to educate us on the efforts that are being made to overhaul the pretrial system here in Harris County. We've got a couple current events we're going to talk with you about. And we're going to open up the phone lines around 8:30, 713-807-1794 is the number. I also have Twitter up at HCCLA_TV. So you can send us your questions and comments there. A lot going on. Julio, I want to talk about first this, the murder case we talked about last week with Troy and Sean. Harris County Sheriff's deputy and her husband charged with murder. This came out, you know, right before we went on the air last week. The interesting thing, and you quickly picked up on it, the problem's in the indictment. I mean, I couldn't believe it when you were texting me, but share for our viewers what your in-depth legal analysis showed once you read the actual indictments.
Well, so we're on the show. The indictment breaks right around there.
We didn't have a copy of it.
Right, the copy. That's right. The copy wasn't there. So I'm checking just as you know, as someone who's interested in what's going on. I checked the indictment, and the first paragraph, I'm fumbling kind of through it. It's kind of awkwardly written. Turns out there was an error in there also. But then the second paragraph, I look at the indictment, and it says, you know, the victim killed himself by strangling himself. And
suicide, not homicide.
Right, and I'm thinking to myself, no way. Number one, no way that the biggest case in Harris County going on, somebody messed up the indictment.
And certainly the most attention since Kim Ogg took office in January.
The biggest, and how many eyes did it go through? Was I the first person to notice in the entire Harris County region that the indictment was wrong and incorrect? That can't be true.
I know. It was, when you started pointing it out, it took me, honestly, because I was reading it you texted it to me. And it took me about 5 times reading it on my phone to finally see what the problem was. Because you didn't say, you're like, your comment was, how did they screw this up so bad? And I'm like, what is he talking about? I'm trying to, and then like literally about 5 times through, I finally figured it out, and I was stunned. But
granted, it's a quick fix, and so
it is.
What'll happen is in the indictment, so long as it's timely, they can amend the charging instrument and fix things. And I doubt that if this case developed and down the road it comes to a pressure point where somebody can move to quash the indictment and kind of win on some technicality, I don't think this particular error would have gone that far. And so it's a quick fix, but at the same time, this is one of the biggest cases that's going on right now. How do you mess up such a very simple thing?
I mean, it was in the news again this week. They're having press conferences about the civil lawsuit that's filed. And then they start dropping allegations that the husband has had anger management issues in the past. I guess his ex-wife came on the news, and some reporter found her, and she was talking to them about his anger management issues. And then it comes out he's a trained MMA fighter. And I think you had actually heard that before the news actually officially came out, right?
Well, see, I too train.
Oh yeah.
And knew of his. No, I don't train. But
you're a sparring partner for both Mayweather and McGregor, right?
Well, right. You know, But yes, it turns out that he had some training, and he has some history. 20 years ago, back when BMVs, burglary of motor vehicles, were felonies, the real juice of a lot of the lawsuit and a lot of some of the articles that were posted for the civil lawsuit reference the MMA, reference that at the time the sheriff's office or whoever was conducting the investigation didn't interview all the witnesses, and some of the stuff about his past came out from old petitions or documents from a divorce proceeding that kind of fell apart, and they eventually reconciled and came back together. But that's why, and I'm reading to myself, I'm thinking, when people get into a divorce and you start saying things that you can't erase, and apparently the wife said that, oh, he has anger management issues, drug and alcohol abuse. He's been seeking, he needs an evaluation because there might be something wrong. And granted, they got back together and reconciled, but all those things you can't take back.
Yeah.
And now
where you at?
Now where you at?
You know, the crazy thing though is a lot of that stuff is not necessarily going to come in at trial.
Right.
Because it's old, one. Two, it's not relevant it's only going to be used as basically a character assassination stuff, which under the rules of evidence, under 404B, is improper right. to admit unless it meets certain specific requirements. And this stuff, it ain't going to meet it unless he actually takes a stand, in my opinion.
Well, and one of the ways that a possible defense would be, I guess they'd maybe argue necessity or self-defense or some sort of justification for him not releasing Hernandez. And if he takes a stand and says, yeah, I've never had any, I'm not crazy, I don't have a switch that flips off. Yeah. Here comes all bad things that your almost ex-wife said about you.
Yeah, I mean, they're almost kind of poisoning the jury pool before we even get to it.
Which is huge. Speaking of poisoning the jury pool and getting fair trials, Bill Cosby mistrial. Or is that what happened?
They're deadlocked.
Oh, really?
I don't think they've declared a mistrial yet. The last headline I saw was that they were deadlocked, and that the judge was going to send them back to do more deliberations. Yeah.
And then after the Allen charge or the dynamite charge, so if a jury's deadlocked, the judge will instruct the jury to go back and deliberate some more because we're not going to redo this, okay? You guys got one shot at this. Go back and do it. Get a verdict. And it's only then that from my understanding, it's either a rule or just a form. It's only then after the dynamite charge, then you can ask for a mistrial.
Yeah, but a lot of people were predicting this before it even came down, that it was going to be a mistrial.
Because of the allegation was like 20 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean...
I know. Crazy stuff.
Apparently, what did he say? He said, I have 3 little friends for you to relax you.
The pills, yeah, it's pretty creepy stuff. But, I'm honestly not shocked that, and again, I think somebody had pointed this out in an article I read today, is that, these become very, very hard for jurors to determine what actually constitutes rape or sexual assault. And I don't think everybody can agree. I mean, look what's happening on The Bachelor right now with those allegations that are coming out. That one contestant says another contestant sexually assaulted her. So, I think those are very hard things for juries to decide. When you're trying to weigh testimony, especially stuff that's so old like this.
Right.
It's very tough. But some good stuff to talk about. If you want to call in any of your thoughts on the sheriff's case or on Bill Cosby or anything, we'll open up the phone lines in 20 minutes, and you can send me your comments right here on Twitter. I'll also read them right here on the air. But let's get to our man of the hour here, Kelvin Banks. Yeah. I don't mean to shut you out, but I know you're kind of in a limited role, as I said, of what you can comment on and give opinions on.
Absolutely.
But in some of the stuff that we are talking about, some of these higher level felony cases, Does your office play a much more invested role in supervising those defendants than, say, a misdemeanor case?
So from a hierarchical standpoint, the way that we're structured here in Harris County, and pretrial services is structured differently throughout the country, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. What we do primarily here in Harris County, we do the assessment. So we assess risk and we manage risk. So we do the assessment on the 84,000 that are arrested on AB misdemeanors and felonies in Harris County within a year. And then what we do is we manage those that are released on a pretrial bond. Typically speaking, pretrial bond is going to be those that are considered typically lower risk individuals. There may be some people that may be higher risk that end up on pretrial bond. Those that are released on financial bonds are supervised by Community Supervision and Corrections Department, the probation department, based on a county attorney opinion about, I think it's back in 2010. And so although we do all the assessments for everyone that's arrested on AB misdemeanors and felonies in Harris County, there is a bifurcated system of supervision that separates out for those that are placed on financial secure bond and then those that are placed on what locally we call pretrial bond, or what more nationally known as personal bond.
Mm-hmm.
So if an individual is arrested in Harris County, do they hit a pretrial evaluation for both AB misdemeanors but also felonies? Is
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so then where are they having this interview? Are they having it up when they hit the county, or when they hit the city jail, or when are they having the meet with pretrial?
So we have a couple different locations, but primarily we are interviewing them at the Harris County Jail, but we also are staffed to interview at the Houston Police Department as well. And so we are interviewing at the Houston Police Department, and it's critical for us because our current risk assessment tool, I know we're going to get into the new tool we're going to be using here in July, but our current risk assessment tool is an interview-based tool. So you have to have an interview to be able to assess the risk, to be able to move forward in terms of a recommendation. And so we have to interview them either at Harris County Jail or at the Houston Police Department, where we're currently staffed.
How? I cannot conceive it in my mind that how you all are able to interview so many people. How are you able to do that?
The way that the system is structured, and we just have a phenomenal staff that's working out. But I will say this, that in terms of percentages, our goal was always to interview 100% of the people that fall within the felonies or AB misdemeanors. What we have historically completed is about 80% of those. And so there's a 20% gap that we're not going to be able to get, or we haven't consistently been able to get. Either they're not available going to the hospital, or they refuse to be interviewed for those reasons. So there's 20% that we're not capturing. And the new tool, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, I know, but the new tool, it's a non-interview based risk. So we'll be in a position to do 100% assessment on those that are arrested in Harris County without having to do an interview for them.
Are you, do you come upon the situation where an individual posts a bond before they can get interviewed?
So when they're arrested, currently in the system, the way the system is set up, if they're arrested at those outlier jails, and the bail schedule is applied, they're able to bond out from those outlier spaces in the current pretrial release system, yes. And
is the current tool, is that the TRAS, or is it something different?
No, the current tool is called the Harris County Pretrial Risk Assessment.
So risk assessment, and I'll say down at the courthouse, the TRAS, the risk assessment, the CAST, they're all kind of thrown out there. Do you have any involvement with the TRAS, or is it you're strictly the Harris County Risk Assessment?
We're strictly Harris County Risk Assessment. It was vetted and validated for pretrial services here in Harris County. And again, it's a front-end tool that's used to assess risk for those that are arrested and during the pretrial stage of their case.
Kelvin, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started, how you got here to Houston, and where you were before that.
So me and my wife and my 6 daughters, we moved down.
Wait. Did you say 6 daughters?
I have 6 daughters.
That's amazing.
6 daughters?
6 daughters and 1 wife. So I often tell people I'm a king that lives in a queendom. Okay, so my daughters are ages 10, 15, 17, 20, 21, and 25. And I always forget because they change every year.
My wallet is hurting for you.
Absolutely.
Having 6 daughters. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you are the man for the job.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you are the man for the job.
Absolutely. So I had 3 in college, and 3 were at home, and 1 is graduating this year. So in the fall, we'll have 4 in college. So we moved here just about 8 months ago. Prior to being appointed as the Director of Pretrial Services for Harris County, I was the Director of Pretrial Services for Third Circuit Court, which is Wayne County in Michigan, which is the largest county in Michigan, with the major city being the city of Detroit.
And how does that compare population-wise to Harris County?
So Wayne County is the 19th largest jurisdiction in terms of counties, in terms of population in the country, and Harris County, is, as you know, is number 3.
Yeah.
And so it was increase in staff, it was an increase in budget, increase in the volume of cases that are coming through as well.
And they sold you on our fabulous summertime weather to get you down here to take this job, right?
They absolutely, well, this is how they did it. It was very amazing through the interview. The interviewing process was an amazing process. I flew down, and there were at least 35 people in the room. So it was, I'm expecting about 5 to 10 people, but every key stakeholder that's involved in the criminal justice system had a representative in the room. But one of the selling points, there was a couple of them, but one of the more weather-related, I guess, selling points was there was a slide that they showed a side-by-side picture of Detroit and Houston in December, where Detroit had snow and people in winter coats, and people in Houston were running. And for me, that was the deal maker. It just
they just didn't show you the August picture.
right.
Absolutely.
With the egg frying on.
They left that one out.
Yeah.
So obviously Houston being the third, and Harris County being the third largest county in the nation, what do you bring from Detroit? I mean, what did you accomplish in Detroit? Talk about some of the things that you were able to get done there that make you the right man for this job here.
Okay, so prior to being the Director of Pretrial Services in Detroit, I was a probation officer for 13 years. Also was the union president for all the probation officers in Wayne County. State of Michigan is a unionized shop, in contrast to what happens here in Texas.
Yeah, we don't know anything about you.
Absolutely. And so union shop is huge up there, and so was very successful. I had one of the highest success rates or inverse recidivist rates as a probation officer for 13 years, and then got the promotion to be the Director of Pretrial Services. We did an evaluation of the entire department. I reached out to the National Institute of Corrections to do a pretrial evaluation of our department. Working with them and even with some national associations, I was able to evaluate where we currently are or where we're currently at in Detroit, and then they gave some recommendations as to how we can make improvements. We were in the process of synergizing our efforts there in Detroit, and I was, again, 3 years in when this opportunity in Houston came about. I did have 2 other opportunities that I was looking at on the table. I was being considered for the chief of pretrial in the federal system in the Eastern District of Michigan, and I was also in the final stages of being considered for the director of the Detroit Detention Center. When this Houston opportunity came about, for me, the Houston opportunity was, there's just sometimes in life where all the planets line up, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's what Houston presented for me. We wasn't looking to relocate. I wasn't looking, and my oldest daughter wasn't. Well, excuse me, my oldest daughter at home wasn't looking because she had a friend boy back in Michigan, and it was her senior year, and she was fighting against it. But my wife wanted to relocate. But to me, the biggest. What made the decision for me was the opportunity when I flew down here from the interview, and really, to be honest, from the interview to date, that room full of people that were involved in the interview have been consistently at the table as a part of the local pretrial reform efforts. And so that synergy for me was amazing. It was breathtaking because in Detroit we just started to amp that up. We were trying to get people to come to tables, and with busy schedules and various vested interests, sometimes it's hard to get everybody that's involved in the criminal justice process and even the pretrial release process at the table consistently. Yeah. They were at the table, and they've been at the table for the 8 months that I've been here.
Wow. Well, and of course you step into the middle of a real, how do we call it, an it storm.
Did you know that?
With the lawsuit. And I know you can't comment on the lawsuit because it's obviously still pending, and we're waiting for that to play out. But I mean, last week, the huge news, of course, that Justice Thomas, of all people, denied the stay. It went up to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit denied the stay, and then they tried to appeal it to the Supreme Court for a stay, and they denied it as well. And to come from Justice Thomas, I mean, at this point, you have to wonder, when does the county go ahead and lick its wounds and go back and really focus its efforts on the reform? I wonder, and not obviously to get into the details of it, but we had, once that stay was granted, the sheriff just obviously started releasing people because he had to, per the order. And I'm sure that had to just create a mass pandemonium in your world when that started happening.
Well, there's parts of it. I think I can say that there are parts of the injunction order that we had to comply with specifically in Harris County Pretrial Services, and we've done what we need to do to be in compliance with the order as well. I think that's as much as in terms of the pending litigation. Mm-hmm. But I was going back to your original statement. I was aware of the pending lawsuit on the federal level, but what was more encouraging for me is the commitment locally with the Harris County key stakeholders that were committed to reform. So reform can happen in multiple ways. It can be a federally imposed based on new case law, something that it can happen that way. It can happen from a statewide change in the state constitution or some legislation new bills being passed, or it can be instituted on a local level.
When you say there are 35 people at the table, can you tell us who some of those people are?
So we had representatives from the Sheriff Department, the DA, the public defender, the head of HR, the budget manager, judges on the district court, as well as the county criminal court, the standing committee. We had representatives from Precinct 1. So it was really intimidating in some ways to walk into a room to see that, intimidating initially, but encouraging as well, to see the representatives from that sit even on CJCC here locally. Everyone was involved, and their support was involved as well.
Up in Detroit, did they have a cash bail system similar to what we had, or still, at least in the felony level, have for the most part? Is that the same kind of bail system that you were used to up in Detroit?
Yes.
Okay. And did they were what we call PR bonds, where you just have to, a personal recognizance bond, where they basically issue you a citation to come back to court, and you don't have to post any cash. Were those given out up in Detroit?
Absolutely. So I think the national average for PR bonds is about 24%. We were close to that in Detroit. It depends on how you look at the numbers here in Harris County. We're anywhere from 8 to about 29%. If you don't take into account those that are released at the outlier spaces on financial bonds, then that number obviously goes up because people that get into that are released once they go in front of a probable cause judge. We do some local early presentment right now. About 4% of people are presented early out of Houston Police Department that gets PR bonds and can be released from there.
And so this is one question that I want to know, because when we had Sheriff Gonzalez on before he became sheriff, he was then candidate Gonzalez, but one of the things he talked about was really making use of the outlying facilities, and so that they wouldn't have to transport people downtown. But if I understand you, that if they are out there, that they won't be able to get interviewed to possibly get a PR bond. Is that the case?
So that's in the current system. So the new system that's rolling out in July will afford that opportunity. So okay. So the new system, in addition to us adopting the public safety assessment, which is, the acronym is PSA, that we're going to be adopting from the Arnold Foundation here in July, the entire pretrial release process is changing. And so that's a little bit larger than our department, because that involves all the other key stakeholders. And so what will happen in the new system, upon arrest, those individuals the local police department will contact the DA's intake. We'll have 2 staff in the DA's intake. And once they submit their DIMS report, we'll get a notification and we'll begin the assessment process. Some of the details are still being worked out, but in essence, what the new system will provide, it'll be 2 major changes in the new system. One, a person will be able to get a PR bond sooner than they've ever consistently been able to get throughout Harris County. And then the other part is kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier. If a person is deemed high risk, they will not be able to be bond out before they get before a probable cause judge. So from a safety standpoint, those high-risk individuals will have to come down to Harris County Jail, and then they will go before a probable cause judge. Currently, in the current system, we don't know what their risks are because we cannot interview them, and so they're bonding out from that space. So there'll be an earlier opportunity, early presentment is what we're calling it for a PR bond. A person would not be booked down, come down to Harris County Jail. So we're trying to get those things as early on in the process, and because we don't need an interview. And the new Arnold tool is a 9-factor tool, just by the way as well. It's heavily based on criminal history.
So what are your staffing needs? I mean, how many people do you need to effectively, how many people do you have now? And how many people do you think it will take to effectively implement the reforms and the changes that you want to see happen?
So we started at about 100 staff. We just got approved for 13 additional staff. So we have 3 different divisions in our department. We have this assessment where we say assess the risk. The way that we looked at that, there's 84,000 arrests in Harris County, felony and AB misdemeanors. That vests down to about 7,000 a month. It's a little over 200 something per 24-hour shift, and it's about 78 per 8-hour shift.
7,000 misdemeanors a month?
No, 7,000 felonies and misdemeanors.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yep, and so what ends up happening is that we wanted to staff up to be able to handle that volume in an 8-hour shift. Make sure we have enough people to handle potentially 78 assessments in an 8-hour shift. That's our assessment unit. The management part of it is that we wanted the caseload ratios to be manageable as well. So what we've done with those 13 new positions, and we want to thank the county commissioner court, all the 4 county commissioners as well as the county judge that approved that unanimously to give us those, which is unheard of as well, which is it shows to me in actions their commitment to the local reform efforts. And what it gives us from a monitoring standpoint, we have 6 pretrial officers that are going, is going to allow our caseloads to come down to a level that's going to be manageable. So it's like the math parabola. You get to a point where I'm not
a math person.
Me either as well. So I stole this from somebody. So if I remember their name, I'll give them credit. But you get to a point where it's maximum mins. You get to a point where you take on too much where it becomes to negatively impact what you're doing. And what we were concerned about public safety. So we want to make sure we have caseload ratios at a place where my people know what's going on with those people that are being supervised by pretrial services. So we're staffed up to that, to answer your question.
And so is the goal to have people out on PR bonds who qualify, and we'll get to how one would qualify or not qualify, or get a green light or not good, or get a recommendation. I'm not sure if you can touch on that before they see a magistrate, and then they would be arraigned like you kind of see on TV. You really don't see it much in misdemeanor courts, but it's starting to happen more, I've seen, where the first time they even see a judge will actually be in the courtroom.
In their assigned courtrooms.
Right.
Yep. So the goal absolutely is to get, so it's basically, we have a risk-based system. What the industry is really pushing towards is to have a risk-based system. So you lose all that subjectivity sometimes when you don't have risk tools in place. We're just moving to a different tool, a non-interview based tool that's going to be positioned early on in the process, shortly after the arrest and before a person gets to, get booked down into Harris County Jail. And so a person will, the goal is to identify those low to low moderate risk individuals that can be safely released into the community and not necessarily make it down to Harris County Jail.
Will you be making, is it a recommendation, or is it or is it more of, yes, he's approved, he's not approved? After the tool, do you just provide a score? Do you provide an opinion? Do you see what I'm saying? What
Yes,
I'm asking? So,
absolutely.
What is it?
So in our current system, we do make a recommendation. In the new system, it will not be a recommendation because there is a statutorily required bail schedule. But the new bail schedule, can't really speak to the details of this bail schedule, but the new bail schedule that's agreed upon in both courts, the misdemeanor as well as the felony court, is a risk-driven bail schedule. So the new bail schedule will be a risk-driven bail schedule, and it'll be based on the score that comes from the PSA. So once we score it, we provide that information, the bail schedule will be applied, then those individuals that qualify for early presentment will have an opportunity to be released early.
Wow. Will that risk assessment or this tool, am I saying, it's a risk assessment?
Yes, it is.
Will that risk assessment be available to the defense, to the prosecution, just to the judges? For example, we always want to see what the TRAS says or what the assessment tool says, what's his score. We always hear these terms in court, and sometimes they're always available, but you got to go find them. Will the results from this tool be available for both sides, or is it just for the judges, or is it just in-house?
So the current tool, the current risk assessment is available to the judges and is available to the DA, who's the only ones really that are represented at the probable cause. The new process will have a public defender there as well. And
when does that start?
That starts the first week in July as well.
Okay.
So that's a part of the local reform efforts to have
2 weeks basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you say, I mean, so will there be a pretrial services officer at those? So you'll have a DA, a public defender, and someone from your office at all of these probable cause hearings down in the magistrate court?
Yep. So so pretrial services, in essence, is what we call an impartial entity.
Right.
So we don't get into the guilt or innocence, but we're impartial. We want to do our mission statement is to gather accurate and timely information and to provide that to the judicial officers here in Harris County, so they can make what we call a quote unquote informed pretrial release decision. So we will still be represented there, and we'll be providing that information. And then at that point in time, there will be, I think it's called an adversarial hearing, right? You guys know as a lawyer, right?
So we're intimately familiar with the adversarial part of this process.
So you have both sides there, and so they can discuss the merits of what the risk assessment and even what it led to in terms of the bail schedule being applied to it.
We've reached the halfway point.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
So I want to open up.
Yeah,
the phone
open it
lines.
up.
So I think we have a call.
One.
We got a call coming in, but you can call in with your questions. We've reached the halfway point of the program. 713-807-1794 is the number, and let's jump over and take our first call. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hello. I'd like to ask Mr. Banks if his office has any plays any part in pretrial diversion, or is that the purview of the DA and the judge only, or what could he do in terms of pretrial diversion?
Great, thanks for your call. Thanks for your question.
So in the past, we were a part of some pretrial diversion efforts called the First Chance program. That ended at it was a pre-charge, post-charge diversionary program that ended at, I think, the end of February. We're truly, at this point in time, we're truly a pretrial industry. We're not department. We're not into we haven't put our efforts into the diversion part of it, but we're really looking at those individuals that can be identified, assessed, and then released safely into the community. Pretrial services, just for the record, is based on two federal statutes: is the Bail Reform Act of 1966 as well as 1984. 1966 speaks to if a person is released to the community, what is their probability of returning to court, and then 1984 deals with the public safety if they are released. So on those two tenets is how we're structured, and we're kind of pretrial purists. In other pretrial operations throughout the country, they have that diversion component as well. We had it with the pre-charge, but that element ended the late part of February of this year.
So does the individual who gets put on some sort of diversionary program during the pendency of their case, they're still out on bond, so they usually get like a year-long reset or a 90-day reset or a 6-month reset, and during that time, they have certain things they have to fulfill. Is pretrial involved during that period with them? Let's assume let's say it's a DWI and the individual has conditions on, because he's still on bond. Are those pretrials monitored by pretrial services, or are those a function of community supervision?
Those are get into more of those PTI, those
right.
pretrial interventions. So that gets into, that's more of which is more consistent with as a probation officer for 13 years, you have post-convicted individuals and you have ongoing services that are being applied to those. What the true pretrial purists is try to protect is that, and you can mandate those services based on that. Either in Michigan we call it a plea on advisement, or you post out. What we're doing is that we're dealing with those that are really presumed innocent. And so you don't want to get into mandating services for individuals and even using your resources for a person that's still presumed innocent. And so we're just looking at trying to assess their risk, manage them during that pretrial stage, and not get into mandatory services for a person that's still considered innocent.
To me, this is mind-boggling. We have the head of a major division, and it's all based on the premise of presumption of innocence. That's amazing. It's mind-boggling. It should be such a fundamental pillar of what the justice system is, but they had to go to Detroit and bring the best they had out there and bring them in. That's amazing. That's wonderful. So there was something that we talked about on the show maybe 2 weeks ago, that there's a public defender at the bail hearing, at the probable cause hearing now.
Starting in 2 weeks.
It's starting in 2 weeks, in July. Okay. And we were wondering how in the world that those individuals, those attorneys, those warriors down there were going to handle the 70, 80,000 cases that come to the door and are going to have a real hearing now. But now, from what I'm gathering, is if you can have early presentment on more cases, there might not have the need for 70 or 80,000 people to have this to be magistrated like they currently are now. Is that right?
Yeah. So in the new pretrial release process, one of the inherent goals is for those decisions to be made and people to be able to be released, and they'll still be able to be released from those outliers spaces, even if a financial bond was imposed, as long as they're not considered high risk. And so they will still be able to release either if on a financial bond at those outlier spaces. But again, the new caveat is that a large portion will be considered for pretrial bond at those outlier spaces, and they would never make it down to probable cause to be before a probable cause judge.
You know, I have seen it, and I'm seeing it in my head now, where, you're having to have a pretrial supervision officer actually be assigned to courts now, like County Court of Law number 6, Yolanda's there, and she's there, and she's kicking butt, and she's trying to do everything she can, and that's her court now, and her hair's a little frazzled. So these other 13 new people.
Sure, she appreciates you saying
well,
that.
Well, she always looks wonderful though, always, and does a wonderful job, but she really does. But what I'm seeing is there's a lot of work, I guess, in these individuals who are coming in on the outlier counties, who I guess haven't gone through or been through the interview process, and they're having to make a recommendation to the judge in the court for a PR bond right then and there. Mm-hmm. Why is that happening? Is it because we're missing some individuals, or why do you suppose that's happening?
I think in part it's happening because those people are bonding out at those outlier spaces and they're never making it down in the current system, they're not making it down to be interviewed by our staff. And in the new system, again, those assessments will be done because it's a non-interview based assessment, and that bail schedule would be applied in that early presentment. They'll be able to move forward from there.
Do we have situations where this was brought up to me, like for example, on an individual gets accused of a DWI, there's no blow schedule recommended by the judge to blow in the machine, but when the individual leaves court and I guess goes to the 12th floor, goes somewhere, because I really don't know where they go after they leave court. They're instructed to go somewhere, but then they come back and say, well, now I'm on a blow schedule. Do you see that, or is that just something kind of an outlier example, or does pretrial have any additional recommendations that may be or supervision that's not given by the judge?
So one of the things, and I'll answer it in more of a global response. Sure. One of the new things that we're going to be doing in pretrial services is that's rolling out with the new system is called what we call differential levels of supervision. Wonderful. It'll be a 4-level system where those people that are low-risk individuals, they'll be on what we call a monitoring level. They will not even have to report to us. There will be no conditions for them. All they're going to be receiving, we'll do a criminal history on them, I think, on a monthly basis. We're still working out the details of that. But we'll send a court reminder 7 days out and a day of in terms of reminding them for court. So in some ways, right now, we have these standard conditions that are being applied across the board, and they're not risk-based decisions. They're not risk-based conditions. In the new system, we'll have risk-based conditions. So the higher the risk, the more conditions will be applied. The lower the risk, those individuals, we don't want to overburden them. And so in some ways, we've been over-supervising individuals that are probably truly low-risk individuals. And in some ways, we may have not been supervising as good those individuals that are higher-risk individuals. So in the new system, we'll have a systematic way of being able to say, hey, this is based on this person's risk. These are the prescriptions, the frequency, the contacts that they need to have with pretrial services and or community supervision, because the same differential levels that we're rolling out for those that are going to be released on pretrial bond, we've also collaborated with probation, so there will be a consistent pretrial supervision provided regardless of departments. And that's going to be something unique for the first time as well when we roll that out in
Was
July.
that your idea?
It was my idea.
Nice.
That's one of the reasons they bought me from Detroit. No,
Nice, innovator. Hey, the Motor City.
You said you're getting 13 additional people.
Yes.
I assume they start July 1.
Some of them already started.
Okay. Just assuming, we've had Ed Emmett on our show. I don't know that he's a frequent viewer of our show. Julio and I would like to think that perhaps the county commissioners watch our show.
He likes our stuff.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe he's watching. But how many more people would you like them to give you, ultimately? I mean, what do you think is an adequate number? And ideally, where would you like to see your staff get to?
So when we look at the three different divisions that we have, the one that we didn't really talk about is our computer applications division. We think once we fill our vacant positions with those, we're staffed up there. We believe with the new positions that we've been awarded in those 13 new positions, from an assessment standpoint, unless there's some spike in population and spike in crime, there's been consistent about 84,000 for the last 4 or 5 years. So we think we're staffed up. That's going to be about 60, maybe about 70, a little over 70 staff that are in our assessment 24-hour operations. What we have to monitor, though, and what we're going to be looking to monitor, we have enough staff with the new staff to start on our managing the risk, the supervision part of it. Well, with those additional 6 people, so of the 13, 11 are pretrial officers, 2 are what we call docket clerks. The docket clerks support those officers that are in the monitoring division by checking people in our front office or making phone calls as well. And so we believe that we're good to start. We're going to watch this trend. We're going to, and we met with the budget office today to have some further discussion about it. They're watching the data, and as soon as where we see there's a need or increase, where the differential levels, are coming to place, where we have a volume that our ratios are starting to be out of line. And one of the things that we added to the differential levels is that we have targeted caseload for those specific levels as well. So the lower the risk, the higher the caseload. So you can manage more because you got right. less to do. Right. So with those higher risk individuals, those caseloads are low. And so we're going to be watching that ratio closely to see. But budget and the county commissioners, as well as the county judge, they know that they approved our 13 positions, and they know we're going to be coming back if our needs dictate it. Again, we want to be good stewards of county taxpayers' dollars. So we want to make sure that we can justify what we're requesting from, and that's what we've done from a non-anecdotal but measurement standpoint. That's why we talked about those numbers, because those numbers, again, tell stories for us. And so we're going to watch that over the period of time. We're staffed up with those 13 new positions to start. We're, as our needs, we're expecting some need fluctuation in that monitoring, and we're watching those. We're going to watch those ratios real closely. Right. But they are waiting for us to come back to them for additional positions, and they've already tentatively said that we have a very good chance of those being. That's their commitment to me. That's the walking the walk, if you will, commitment to the local reforms that I've seen since I've been here for the last 8 months.
Interesting.
Is the new tool, aside from the innovations you have created and are bringing, is this tool, you said, it's accredited and it's been peer reviewed? Talk a little bit about that, where it comes from. Has it been shown to be effective in other parts of the country or other parts of the world? talk a little bit about that.
So the term in terms of risk assessment tool is validation. So this particular tool was created and validated on 1.5 million cases across the country. So it's one of the unique tools in terms of it's a nationally validated tool. It is offered by the Laura and John Arnold Foundation. It is a tool that you have to be in agreement. You have to sign an agreement with them to actually utilize it. And so before I arrived, my predecessor, Doug Coppin, kind of began the local pretrial reform efforts. I believe it was back in 2014. He reached out to the Arnold Foundation. At the same time in Detroit, I reached out to the Arnold Foundation. And so we were looking to get the PSA, Public Safety Assessment, in Detroit as well. And so that was one of the things that drew me here. It was three things that primarily drew me here, other than the heat, as well as my wife pushing me to come down to Houston. But it was that the PSA their memorandum of understanding had already been signed and agreed upon by the Commissioner Court. That was already in place. The other piece was that the MacArthur grant, which we applied for in Wayne County and Detroit, that specifically targets reducing the jail population. And so that was in place. That was key to me as well. And then again, going back to the third thing for me was the synergy that was there. But the risk assessment tool is currently being used in the entire state of Kentucky, the entire state of New Jersey, the entire state of Arizona. Is being used in, I believe, in 3 counties in Illinois, including Cook County, which is number 2 in terms of population in front of us here in Harris County. And it also, I believe, it's used in about 29 jurisdictions throughout the country. So, and so we're excited about it. We're excited about it. Our current tool is validated as well. So I would not invalidate it. I just think in terms of us needing to get to that 100% and have a non-interview base, to me, I would like, for me as a pretrial service director, I do not want a pretrial release decision to be made in the jurisdiction in which I'm in without our influence. And so our goal is to get to that 100%.
And the idea would be to eliminate the subjective portions or nature of the process. So the guy who walks in, he may have no criminal history, but has tattoos on his eyelids. If you look at him on paper, I guess he wouldn't be a risk. Or I guess if you looked at him without looking at him, you'd say, oh, a PR bond eligible. But what we've seen is that bonds can be at the whim of how an individual looks, or what a comment an individual says, or even the type of charge. Is that what the new tool tries to do, or is that one of the goals, or how does it differing? If you can talk a little bit more about it from what's currently being done.
So, not necessarily in comparison to what's currently being done, but you'll never have a system that's fully there's no subjectivity, right? But you're trying to move into what the research shows is that in a fully subjective system where there's no risk assessment at all, there's about a 50-50 chance of getting it right in terms of being able to predict if a person is a risk, flight risk, or going to commit new criminal activity. As you start to apply risk assessment tools, more evidence-based objective risk assessment tools, that number goes up to 70, 80, 90% in terms of accuracy. And so what the research shows as well that and the tool is not meant to undermine judicial discretion. It's to influence judicial discretion. So we're going to use the tool to give them the information, again, the judges. And what the research shows that with judicial discretion and a validated risk assessment tool, that those are the best predictors of a person's failure to appear, as well as their criminal activity should they be released pretrial. And so to go back to your original one of your earlier statements, that one of the 9 factors on the Arnold's tool is not around tattoos, having tattoos or not. So good. If that helps you out in terms of
yes.
We got another phone call coming in, so let's hop back over to the phone lines. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt. Hello.
Arnold tool has a cost associated with it. Is there a fee, a licensing fee, for instance?
I'm sorry, can you start over? You didn't cut in there for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. How much does the Arnold tool cost the county?
Without getting into numbers and generally, I think we can talk about it. I mean, and who's footing the bill? We could, yeah.
So the Arnold tool is being provided in terms of direct costs free of charge from the foundation. And so that's why they're selective in terms of who they choose. They're offering, and they're paying for their own technical assistance. We're receiving technical assistance here locally by a company called Luminosity. Dr. Marie Van Nostrand, who's a nationally known pretrial researcher, is providing our TA here locally. But there is no direct cost to use the tool. They're providing the training for us. Obviously, there are going to be indirect costs in terms of what we, in terms of staffing up, right? That's an indirect cost to being able to make sure we have enough people in place to utilize the tool. But it is not a direct cost, if you will, from the foundation to. But they do have a vetting process. They're looking for certain things when they're looking for communities to adopt the tool, and so we vetted through that process prior to me getting here, and that was a key sell for me in terms of coming down here.
One of our viewers just sent in a tweet asking if the changes in pretrial services will have any impact on community supervision.
Community supervision in terms of the department, or in terms of the services that we provide to those in the community?
It's a great question. This is what the question says: will the changes in pretrial services impact on community supervision in any way?
So I will go back to this in terms of just, if you're talking about not the Department of Community Supervision, but how supervision is provided in the community, is that the new, again, what we talked about, the differential levels of supervision, the dosage of supervision is going to change in the new system. And so those individuals, again, that are higher risk are going to be required to have more frequent contact with pretrial services and with community supervision, the department. Those that are low risk, those that are in that lowest risk, will not have. And so, yes, there'll be the dosage, the frequency, the conditions are going to change in the new system as we're rolling out what we call differential levels of supervision, which is based on risk.
Could this possibly lead to PR bonds on felonies?
Yeah. So
wow.
Yep. So all felons, again, for nonviolence, if they vet through the system, right, they'll be able to get a PR bond.
Yeah, I mean, I would think
as a low risk.
Well, for instance, on financial crime cases, or something where there's a nonviolent offense. I mean, I would assume that the real only thing you're looking at is whether or not the defendant would have a risk of flight at that point.
Community. Oh, well, for that type of offense.
Well, I mean, for instance, if it's a state securities fraud violation, or if it's some sort of engaging in organized criminal activity that deals with more of a fraud perpetrated on a company or something like that, where you're not talking about guns or assaults or anything like that. Those are nonviolent offenses. And, as we've seen in the federal system, a lot of those cases do get PR bonds, and the ones that end up with very high monetary bonds are the ones where the judges determine, hey, these guys, they got a lot of funds, they got the ability to access planes and passports, and they might have the risk of flight, so we're going to make them put up some money. And so I would assume that there might be some wiggle room in those kind of cases for getting PR bonds to start.
The beauty of the Arnold tool for me as well, if I can get more into depth, is that it carves out a person's flight risk in terms of a number from 1 to 6. It carves out their potential new criminal activity from 1 to 6. Then it also gives what we call a violent flag. Which is not a numerical number, but it is a flag based on the instant charge being a violent charge. And so with the violent charge, that enhances, if you will, the risk. And so and when we look at risk, whether it's felony or misdemeanor, if they're high risk, they're high risk. If they're low risk, they're low risk. So you're moving away from a strictly charge-based, which can be subjective, right? Your charge-based system, where you're going into a risk-based system, and some of those factors are taken into place. But in essence, a person with a felony could receive a PR bond because they're deemed a low-risk individual.
And the district court judges are at the table at this?
The judges amazing. at both levels. We've been, again, I can't speak on their behalf, but I'm very encouraged by the engagement from both respective benches, as well as all the other key stakeholders since I've been here for the last 8 months.
Well, we've seen reforms within the county with the establishment of the reintegration courts, and it's an attempt to clear those jails and give rehab and all the good stuff also. But everybody knows at the courthouse that you look at it and they know exactly what's going on. They got too many people in here, too many low-level, less than a gram, state jail felony offenses, trace cases. and they got to somehow treat these guys, give them treatment, and get them out of jail, and do whatever they can to prevent them from coming back in jail. And so tools like this may very well be a solution, a key, at least maybe not a solution, maybe, but at least the key to open a door in the right room, in the right direction.
I say this, as we get it right, not if we get it right, as we implement this, I feel like this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something that's going to outlive us. And so this is one of those destiny things that it doesn't open up all the way. If I maybe wouldn't have come to Harris County 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the planets may have not lined up. For me, with those things that are in place, that we have an opportunity to do something that become, for me, a model pretrial release process for the country to follow.
Right.
And so in that sense, will be a model that my colleagues across the country can look to, and even my hometown of Detroit can look to, and we can say, hey, if we can do it here in the third largest county in the country, it can be done anywhere.
What I saw in this story this week of Sheriff Garcia basically promoting 62 new people in his jail and getting them some sort of modified pathway to becoming sworn peace officers and making them kind of, I think it's detention deputies. I don't know if you saw this or not, but he's bringing in more people to help out at the jail. And we've got the new processing center coming online. I mean, have you had any conversations with the sheriff? And I mean, did you know about this? And if so, how do you think adding more detention deputies can help facilitate the pretrial process?
I have not had any direct contact with the sheriff in regards to that subject, and I can't really speak directly to it. But the only thing I can say about staffing up is making sure you have ratios, as you deal with the volume. So if there may be some mandates in place, in terms of jail commission or standards in terms of that may have went into that decision. I can't really speak to that. I'm not sure about that. But I think it's encouraging, if will, to make sure that you have enough staff to do the job and protect the community. For me, staffing up has to do with community safety as well. Safety, officer safety. I wanted enough staff to be able to monitor the people that we have under our supervision so that we know what they're doing. We're not guessing, we're not hoping, we actually know what they're doing. And so until we staff up, until you get those ratios, you're kind of in the dark and you're hoping. And so I don't want to be in that space. And the local commitment has to ensure is supporting us by way of action, so we won't be in that space. So I couldn't speak directly to him. I have not spoken with him about that, but I know from our standpoint of staffing up, it has to do with making sure we have the ratios and the enough staff to deal with what we need to deal with from a safety standpoint.
Well, we only got about 30 seconds left. Man, this hour has flown by.
There's so much left to talk about. How do you deal with the homeless, the mentally ill? I mean,
we're going to have to bring you back on.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, because I mean, I honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect.
Okay.
Because I think the bar has been set pretty low in this county, frankly.
Okay.
I'm just being honest with
Okay.
you. And so I wasn't, and Julio and I talked about this. I wasn't sure what we were going to get from you tonight.
Okay.
And honestly, I am very encouraged.
It's some big time. This is like front of history kind of like stuff.
And I have.
It's going to outlive us, guys.
I have a ton of questions. I'm very encouraged. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I hope that the viewers at home, that we've answered at least. I think we've gotten the tip of the iceberg. So, I appreciate y'all joining in, and Kelvin, I appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We're gonna get you back on the program.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, for Julio Avila, Jimmy Ardwan here. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.